If Maria supported the show, I'd be less sick of podcasts.
Blah blah blah, blah blah.
Sending out good vibes,
Blah blah,
good vibes,
blah
good vibes,
blah, blah.
good vibes, good vibes.
108 breaths of deep gratitude and prayers for guidance and protection, and put on a didgeridoo and shamanic drumming track, shivers or vibrations and stuff like that.
Okay, guys, welcome back to the Grimerica Show. Merry Christmas. Coming at you, Christmas Eve edition of the Grimerica Show with third time around Rick Strassman, just like a week after Joe Rogan. So that's kind of cool, I guess. Rick went from there to here. I mean, we had Rick on, what was it, 10 years ago?
10 years ago, yeah.
10 years ago. So almost probably within the first year of starting the podcast, which will be turning 12 in another 4 months. 5 months? Or 4 or 5 months. So, yeah, good chat.
Yeah, I mean, he's famous, of course, for the DMT, the spirit molecule. I mean, he's got a CV that is unbelievable. I mean, he's worked on these studies with psychedelics for so long. He's written books like The Psychedelic Handbook, DMT and the Soul of Prophecy, Joseph Levy Escapes Death, Inner Paths to Outer Space, and then his latest one that we talked to him about, My Altered States. So it's pretty interesting. He's, super knowledgeable guy, experienced a lot of stuff, and this is like a book about his personal experiences. So it's pretty cool.
Very cool. And it's a good chat. I mean, it's always a little weird to interview Rick because you can tell he's not loving it. He's doing his promotion because he has to, but he's not a salesman by any stretch of the imagination. But he's good. He's good. So how was your travel experience?
I don't know, delayed planes, delayed trains. I got up at 3:30 to go to the airport. Then my flight was delayed. I got there. So that was a little annoying. Kind of had a Christmas at home for a bit with the kids and Maria and some of the family, and then left early in the morning, and then I got here. The ferry was late too, so yeah, long day altogether. But it's all good. It's all good.
So how long was your flight delayed?
Probably an hour and a half. They had to switch planes or something. It was Air Canada. I tried Air Canada because actually my experiences have been better than WestJet recently on Air Canada. Because I used to hate Air Canada. No, I didn't. For once, I thought, you know what? I'm just going to pile everything into a little backpack and just do that. I'm not going to.
So did you even do a carry-on?
Well, yeah, I had to bring a backpack. Yeah.
Backpack and a carry-on, or just a backpack?
No, just a backpack.
So did you buy that crazy new flight then? Because you could get just a backpack flight for super cheap.
No, nothing super cheap at Christmas.
Nah, probably not at Christmas. But I flew my mom and my niece return for $400 on that backpack flight. You're only allowed one personal item. That's it. That's got to fit under the seat in front of you.
Yeah.
So you're probably pretty short. You got small clothes. You should be able to.
I mean, they've messed it all up now with all that, right? Now everybody checks, like, of course. Sorry, people don't check bags anymore. Everybody's got that. So they've got themselves into a quandary, right? Now they're checking all the carry-ons at the gate, and that's just,
I get it. I mean, they fucked up and we fucked up because it's just like then everyone just like maximizes all the stuff they could bring for free. They were better off when they just let us bring one bag for free. Just like it used to, or just put the $30 in the ticket. But now it's $65.
I know, it's ridiculously expensive. I know. That's why I was like, no, for once, I'm not going to even bring anything.
When we went to England, Shauna wanted to bring an extra bag. I was like, that's $150 to bring an extra bag there.
Yeah, that's a lot of money, dude. That's a lot of money.
Hopefully it'll get cheaper. I mean, the government is on the verge of collapse. So at the very least, nothing new is going to happen. They're not going to come get any guns, and hopefully, maybe the carbon tax. If he can at least even just do that, that should like
Ease the pain
significantly.
a bit.
Well, it would cut my utility bill down by a third at least.
Yeah.
And I mean, flights, I've got to be paying for a lot of carbon tax, right?
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah.
That's one of those industries that's probably hard hit by the carbon tax. So, I mean, for example, if to fly to the UK and back from Canada, both carbon taxing countries, compared to flying to the Hawaii on an American airline where there's no carbon tax. I guess they're probably getting dinged something for coming into Canadian airspace or something, but it is about a 2.5 to 1 difference. 2.5 times the price for the flight. And it's about the same distance.
Yeah.
About the same distance. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully something happens. I think, like I mentioned in the other show that we do, like the governments are, people are just fed up because the governments keep telling them the stuff that's not true, like, oh, the economy's fine and this and that. And people are like, what is going on? The government just keeps lying to me pretty openly now.
They're pretty good at it.
They're pretty good at it, yeah.
So we hope you guys had a good year here in Great America. This is our Christmas show. We'll probably have one more show this year, but this is pretty close to it. So we hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't support the show, do support the show. GreatAmerica.ca/support. If you enjoyed our little podcast here, we're just, I think, 685, maybe 686, approaching 700 episodes in a hurry. And, if you like it, GreatAmerica.ca/support. We'd appreciate it. If you could send us a little Christmas support, we would, like we're getting carbon tax out the ass up here in Canada. I know it's tough down there in the States. Just imagine if everything cost twice as much, and then and you had to pay for heat most of the year. You're approaching Canada. We do have some people to thank. We did get some little Christmas love.
Thanks.
In the support box this year, we got one from Michael Green. Hey boys, remember, if the women don't find you handsome, they should at least find you handy. Merry Christmas, fellas. $100. Thank you very much, Mike. And then there was one more, but it's in my other email. And that was, who's this one from? I know it's 3333. God, I can't find it now.
Yeah, this all helps. These donations are very helpful. We were bitching about this on our other show too. Like some of our apps went up like double, triple pricing, like StreamYard and Evernote, two things that we use every week in and out. They get you sucked into these platforms, and all of a sudden, like we're paying triple monthly fees on some of these now. Like they just jack up the monthly fees. So we were joking around about how we just need an extra like 10 subscribers, even just to cover the cost of the increase of some of the stuff that we have to use to do the show. It's pretty annoying. So we love you helping us out, and thank you very much.
I can't find it. Oh, I found it. No, that ain't it. That's from 2020. What the fuck?
Yeah, sorry, and I'm on my phone right now in another place. I tried to get onto the computer, but StreamYard wouldn't let me use my speaker or the mic. So I'm on the phone right now, just recording it with Darren. Traveled to the coast, but I mean, I've got a beautiful sunset here, which is amazing, and it's the last, I guess, day of the sun sort of sitting still on its little rotation before it starts moving back the other way, and it's amazing the difference.
Kind of what you did your special on, right? This could be exactly it.
Yeah.
This is the
end of the 3 days, right, where the sun goes down and then it starts moving the other way.
I found it from John Hipwell.
Nice.
3333. Merry Christmas. So thanks,
John.
Yeah, we couldn't do it without you. We really couldn't. So GreatAmerica.ca/support. if you can, when you can. Yeah, well, we got pretty slow around here until tomorrow. We'll get back tomorrow, and then the rest of the kids the next day. Cassandra and Madison, and then we'll have our Christmas later in the week. Sean and
Nice.
I are going to exchange a gift each later tonight, and then the rest will all be on the Friday morning.
Cool. Right
Yeah.
on. How was your hunting trip there on the weekend?
It was oh fuck, I think there's still a duck in the back of my truck. It was slow, super slow.
Oh wow, really? Eh? Wow.
I just got one green winged teal.
Wow, the ducks are onto you.
Well, they're just out of here for winter, you know. We figure they just put the cap on the season. The white boy season would have ended yesterday, would have been the last day. So, you know, that's it till the spring. There's a spring goose hunt. And then that'll be it till fall, you know. So March, April, maybe get some goose hunting in if we're lucky. Other than that. Yeah, the problem is a lot of times it hasn't warmed up enough and everything's still if the lakes are still frozen, they get over here pretty quick. Which is ironic because you'd think it's just as frozen up there. But I think what happens when they get up there, they get to the really big lakes that don't really freeze properly. Even down at Travers where it's 150 feet deep or 110 feet deep, whatever it is, it just like it's minus 20 for a week. And we were down there when it was minus 20. It wasn't frozen.
Wow.
The water, there's just too much water to constantly keep cycling around for it to freeze. It gets cold and sinks down. So warmer water is always rising up. Not much warmer, but warm enough not to freeze. I think that's why Flathead Lake doesn't freeze too. It's just too deep. There's too much of a cycle of the water there just because it's too much water to get it cooled down enough, I guess. I don't know. Or unless you get like if you get it like a fucking minus 30 for a week and it can get that once it gets started.
Right.
Yeah. But I don't say I'd ever fucking go out there with anything, not even walking.
I'll tell you what the difference between Saskatchewan and Alberta is, or at least southern Alberta. Like, I really see a difference without those Chinooks. Like, it seems like once it hits in Saskatchewan, like once the freezing temperatures like hit, like once it stays like that overnight, you just don't get it back. Like, it just doesn't warm up. It just never warms up. You know, in Calgary, it'd be like +5 for a while.
It's +5 here now.
You know, and then, you know, kind of like melts and freezes, melts, freezes, melt, which has its own challenges because everything's freezing and melting overnight. But here it just doesn't melt. The snow's there. There's a lot of snow, right? It's just stuck there. Like, we are in winter for 6 months. If you don't have your shit together, that's it. And
it's warm where you are now, though.
Yeah, where I am now, it's like 5 degrees above. Yeah, it's like 10 degrees above. Yeah, it was stormy last night a bit, but right now there's just sun and clouds, and the sun is setting behind the clouds right now on the coast over Vancouver Island. So it's pretty nice view where I am right now.
It's 5 above here right now.
Yeah.
So I think it's supposed to cool down next week, but it looks like it's gonna be nice all week. So probably leave it at that. I guess it is Christmas Eve. I hope you guys, I don't know if you guys are listening to this today or tomorrow, not to the next day, but we love you. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.
Was that already the Rick Strassman bio? Yeah. All right. Well, Merry Christmas to you, Graham.
Merry Christmas.
Listeners, this is our 11th Grimerica Christmas. So.
Wow, that's crazy, dude. That's almost like it's a fifth of my life. That's what's weird, eh? When you look at it.
It's a quarter of my life.
Yeah.
It's a quarter of my life.
That's crazy.
Over a quarter. So you're a fifth older than me, or you're a whatever your fraction over there. Full fraction. So, all right, guys, enjoy the chat with the one and only Rick Strassman.
All right, Rick Strassman, thanks for joining us again. Thanks for coming back to Grimerica. How you doing?
Good. My pleasure to be back on. I'm doing well. I returned to Albuquerque in May, living in small towns for so long. I wanted to get back into the city, so it's been a good move.
That's good.
Have you been in New Mexico basically the whole time, though? The whole time throughout your research and career, have you been sort of bouncing around New Mexico?
I've been bouncing around New Mexico. I moved out here at first in 1984 and spent 11 years at the university. And then I moved to Canada, the Pacific Northwest, for about 5 years, and then moved back after that. So I've been in New Mexico around 35 years.
Wow, nice.
What
I guess
part
it's
of
pretty hot down there.
Graham's from?
The Pacific Northwest. I grew up in Vancouver, and we might have talked about this last time, but yeah, was that where you were for a while?
I was in Victoria for about
Okay.
3.5 years, and Port Townsend for about a year and a half.
Nice. Right on. I'm going close to there for Christmas in a couple days. The Sunshine Coast, so just across from the island.
Sunshine Coast, yeah.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. It's really dark there, though. It's so strange. It's from being in the prairies now, and you get to that coast with all the trees and the clouds and the valleys. Like it gets really crazy dark.
Yeah, it's really closed in.
Yeah.
That's why I like living in the desert. Big, huge skies. Big
that's like us. Except we're in the snow desert up here. You know, it's going to be snow desert for seven months of the year. But
well, if there's really nothing around, you can see where things are coming from. That's one of the reasons I like it.
Yeah, I like that too. I was thinking about that the other day. I love how you just have this expansive view almost everywhere. Yeah. So
I get
wow,
claustrophobic if I leave for too long. I was
you
in
get
England
what?
for a while. I get claustrophobic. I was in England for a while, and it was just like by the time I didn't realize it when I was there until I got back, and it was like as soon as we left that airport and came out of the tunnel, and there's that just big sky and open plains, and I was like, oh man, I needed that more than I thought.
Well, I think where you live really affects your state of mind. I've been lucky to live in some nice places.
Didn't you spend some time in Alaska too?
My first job out of psychiatry training was in Fairbanks.
That was way back.
Yeah, I was the psychiatrist there for a while. Yeah, I was there a year. Yeah, I've bounced around until moving to New Mexico. Since I moved here, I've been a lot more stable.
It's funny because something resonates with me about that area, even though I haven't really been in New Mexico, but Arizona, New Mexico, that kind of like southern area. I just feel like one day I might want to just like retire down there or live down there, maybe go down there for the winter. We have snowbirds, that go down to Arizona all the time, probably New Mexico too.
Yeah, what's cool about New Mexico is that it's about one third in terms of the influence of what's going on, what's happening on the Native Americans and the Hispanic and the Anglos, and it's about one third each, more or less. So it's a unique mix, which I think it adds up to a kind of a unique New Mexico vibe.
Yeah.
In addition to the sky and the light, the people here, they seem pretty, practical, pretty real.
Yeah. So have you been paying attention? Go ahead, Darren.
I said absolutely. So I'll let you go ahead, Graham, because I was going to jump into the book. So
me too. Yeah, well, I was going to mention the book, so I do want to talk about that because I mean you've been on a couple times when you release your book, so we're happy to talk about your Altered States book. And I guess I don't think I knew that you were going to write this or anything, so I'm wondering why. Like, what made you kind of want to do that? This sort of more of a personal book.
Well, a couple of reasons. Some are personal, some are more, I guess, academic or professional. The personal, I've been taking notes, diary, journal entries for much of my adult life. And I've been in a lot of psychoanalytic psychotherapy and have done a lot of meditation. So I'm kind of rehashing stuff constantly. And I had been accumulating these these stories, and I thought they provided a unique perspective on altered states. Investigated and remembered and laid out very carefully, and then looked at carefully, and then coming to some conclusion about what happened and how it happened and what I learned from it. So the personal stories were piling up, and I like telling stories. I like getting a laugh. So I wanted to write that material, and also wanted it to provide a teaching moment that psychedelic and other altered states aren't always great, and they aren't always terrible, and they aren't always useful, and they can be embarrassing. You can make a lot of mistakes, but one moves forward.
Well, you're muted, Greg.
Can you tell us one of your favorite ones, or one of your special stories in there?
Well, one story that's good. Here's the cover, and it's
Nice.
illustrated. Each of the chapters has one or two illustrations
Nice.
by Marilee Chalice, a wonderful artist in Birmingham, Alabama. So the very first time I smoked any cannabis product, I was, I think, 17. I was a freshman in college, and I wasn't adjusting all that well. And one Friday night, my senior resident advisor knocked on my door and said, "I hear you've never been stoned." And I said, "That's right." And he said, "You want to smoke some hash?" So we did. And it was a completely psychedelic experience. On the clouds, there were clouds coming out of the speakers, purple, beautiful, sparkling clouds. And I felt happy for the first time, fully happy. My inner chatter, criticism went away. And I discovered all these interesting aspects of music and of sound. So in addition to that, my roommate and I were on a rug on the floor of the dorm room, and the floor gave way, and we were flying over the city. Shared hallucination. We were seeing the same thing, and both of us were controlling the movement of the carpet. So I marveled at the experience, but I wondered about it too. I'm like, how did this happen? I was like, just 10 minutes ago, everything was normal, and now I'm seeing clouds coming out of my speakers and flying above this town. And I decided it was chemistry. I started college as a chemistry major. Wanted to develop my own line of fireworks. So when these altered states occurred, or where all these colorful, ecstatic things took place, it seemed a result of chemistry, the chemical changes in the brain. And that, in a way, was what got me interested in psychopharmacology, how the mind is affected by drugs.
What's that journey been like? Because you've been doing this now for 25 years, or I mean, it's got to be close to that. Like, when was, because it really must have started to change for you personally when the spirit molecule came out, which was what, 20 years ago? Was that 98?
Came out in early 2001.
2001. So,
yeah, so it's over 25. It's almost 25. Well, yeah, it's 24 years old, more or less.
So what's that 25 years been like? I mean, it must have just changed exponentially in like acceptance. Like in 2001, it must have been pretty tough out there. And I'm sure we've talked about some of this before, but we've got a bunch of new listeners now. And I think it's worth rehashing some of that. And now, I mean, the last time we talked was quite a few years ago. So I'm just curious what it's like, now I just noticed you're on Joe Rogan last week, the biggest podcast in the universe now, the biggest show in the history of the world. And you kind of started with him back in 2001 coming up with that. So what's that sort of like from opposite ends of the spectrum? What's that like just from personally, and from the like acceptance of the research? because now it seems to be super celebrated, and at least that's what it seems like from my thing. It's like the almost like the flavor of the month for a while there, but it just seems to keep going. It's like, the ayahuasca thing seemed to really start making some hay like a decade ago, and then that just sort of the DMT and the psilocybin, and it's the ibogaine, and it's the people doing stuff in Costa Rica, and it's just seems to be snowballing all over the place, which you would definitely play a role in all of this sort of culture, which has got to be somewhat overwhelming.
Well, the book came out in 2001. I had stopped my research in 95 and just I moved to Canada, worked in Washington, and was a clinical practicing psychiatrist for 13 years. And the book came out, and the film came out as well around then. But I really wasn't involved with any research myself, and there wasn't any going on around the rest of the country. There were a few studies which I might have helped one way or the other with. And then Michael Pollan's book came out, and psychedelics became a lot more popular, and people became more interested in them. Yeah, and so that's kind of started this whole, I wouldn't call it an explosion, but close to it, in interest in the commercial aspects of psychedelics, the scientific aspects, the therapy aspects. Well, I think our work at UNM established a really helpful baseline. It was very rigorous. It wasn't wild-eyed. We crossed all our T's and dotted all of our I's. We worked out a system with the FDA and DEA. So I think we established a really great foundation for the rest of the studies in the country to start taking place. And I feel good about that. I still am asked to consult here and there, but my involvement with my research or others' research is pretty minimal right now. I did publish the Psychedelic Handbook in 2022, which was kind of a summation of everything I knew and thought about psychedelics. But since then, I've been working on this book mostly.
Graham, wasn't there something we talked to someone about DMT recently, and there was something we were going to ask Rick when he came on the show? The Mind Meld guy. God, I can't remember it now.
Is it that
documentary?
The documentary.
Specifically do with shared hallucinations, I think, right?
No, it's telepathy. It's basically telepathy through psychedelics. Like we had a guy on that wrote a book about it, and it was quite fascinating. And he was going through examples of telepathy. And a lot of it was through almost like clinical. It was almost a clinical setting. I mean, it was only like two. It wasn't like a huge group. It was him and one other person usually, and with a fairly large dose, fairly heroic dose, and they would practice this telepathy kind of thing.
Did they ever do any real research? Double blind, placebo?
I don't think so. I don't think so. But it was very full of anecdotes.
Yeah, David Luke has done a lot of that work. He's in the UK. He's real interested. There are a lot of stories about how that works in the field. Like there's many examples. It's been studied in the lab, and the results haven't been that strong, haven't been that promising. But I think when you're studying things like that in the lab, there are a lot of variables that aren't included in a laboratory setting. So that remains to be worked out.
Yeah, his name was Wade Richardson, and his book was The Psychedelic Mind Meld, Telepathically Explored Shared Consciousness.
Huh, that's interesting. Well, I mean, psychedelics are in the news. People are taking them. They're being applied in all kinds of directions.
Yeah. Do you keep up to date on the legalization in the States of like psilocybin, that type of thing? Darren, weren't you mentioning something about Oregon changing the way they have
Oregon and Colorado so far had decriminalized psilocybin?
Yeah. Well, in Colorado, they've legalized pretty much every psychedelic. And in Oregon, I think all drugs were legalized. Then they backpedaled or backstepped on that, backtracked.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
And psilocybin is still available.
Oh, okay. It's still there.
Yeah, you know, but the program that they set up in Oregon for healing centers hasn't really taken off quite yet. They're expensive. The training, the liability. Yeah, some counties are refusing to allow them to practice in their territory. So it's not a slam dunk in Oregon. In Colorado, it's still being worked out over the next year. Uh, I'm in, I am in support of increased access. There needs to be increased access, but I don't think the ideal setting regulatory system has been worked out yet. I'd like to see specialized, specialized um,
Care.
clinics, like
Yeah.
any other kind of clinic, a cardiology clinic, um, psychiatry clinic, with the same kinds of rules, regulations, oversight, those kinds of things. But it wouldn't require a Schedule 1 permit, and you wouldn't have to be giving the drugs in an experimental setting that could be mostly therapeutic. You might be gathering some research data, but it would be mostly for therapy.
And would you agree that that shouldn't be the only access to them is through these like if you had a broader access as well, but there was a way to go in and do sort of more of a clinical sort of care setting. I mean, I know we had a friend on a show a while back, and she was really skeptical about the legalization through the government. The government having control over the distribution and the fabrication and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think that's not a bad idea. Because the standards would be pretty high, and there'd be some encouragement of following those standards.
You mean to have government control it?
To have it regulated like any other
Yeah.
specialty practice. You need to be qualified. You have to be doing continuing education. Your license comes up, for review every year. Yeah, I think it could be folded into federal, provincial, state system. The healthcare system. It wouldn't be ideal, but I mean, I think it would be a good start. I think just anybody can buy psilocybin at a dispensary and take it wherever they want, and to call that, that's that's not the clinical use. That's not for medical healing.
When last time I was in Colorado, I noticed there was even some counties up in the north half that were still super anti-cannabis.
Uh-huh.
Like all the hotels were like, you can't have it on the property, you can't have it here. There's like there'd be signs around town, no pot in this town. It was like I was pretty surprised. It was actually on the way back from Pagosa. I was like, it was my first. Actually, I'd been to Washington, but it was my first time going to Colorado, and we had all this weed on our way back coming through, going to Yellowstone, and then all of a sudden it's like because normally you just don't hear about weed, so it's almost like going back to like the 90s when you're like driving to town and there's all this no weed stuff. So now I'm like paranoid, like when I was a kid again, because it's like a thing here, and for my entire life it hasn't been like super anti-pot. It was just illegal for half of it, but no one was like, it wasn't. I grew up in the late 90s, really coming of age. So it was like, by then it was already pretty culturally accepted. There was really no taboo left on it. And then I drive into this Colorado town in 2019 and I'm like, oh my God.
Uh-huh. Well, just last month I was in Denver for the second annual Psychedelic Cup. And things are pretty out there in Denver. They're selling psilocybin infused bonbons and gummies. And somebody gave me a dual chambered vaporizer with DMT on one side and 5-methoxy DMT on the other chamber. Yes, that's going on in Denver, and people are smoking pot outside, and it's completely different than what you're describing. Yeah, that's Colorado.
Yeah, it seems to be cut in half about just a little north of Denver, and everything north of that is like fucking crazy town. So what's the general scene then? Like, what has that done to the culture around Denver? Because I mean, here in Calgary, they're embracing other things like fentanyl and crack, and it's a real, downbeat atmosphere around every place with these drugs. It's not a very festive place. What's it like with Denver with this sort of liberation movement?
Well, I can just speak, for the event I was at. We stayed downtown in a hotel, walked to the conference center. There were quite a few people there, a few hundred, off and on at any time. Yeah, it's very enthusiastic in Denver. There's a psychedelic society in Denver that meets on a regular basis. Sponsor events. Yeah, it's a cohesive community where there's a lot of psychedelic taking.
Darren, are psychedelics legal in Calgary? I was going to ask you about that in Calgary and Vancouver and stuff now, or are this just the harder drugs? Like,
well, mushrooms seem to be pretty accepted. I mean, you can
there
buy
was that
them
cafe.
online.
You could buy them in that cafe, but then it got shut down. They had a couple stores right where my buddy owns a little food store in downtown Vancouver, and it was right beside there, and then it got shut down, I think.
Yeah, so the mushrooms are pretty ubiquitous. Like they're getting shipped back and forth across the country. Nothing too crazy seems to be happening. There's even a couple places that are shipping DMT, LSD, 5-MeO, these sorts of things too that I've been sort of keeping an eye on, and they've been around for a couple years now. And I think one of them was even sold. Someone bought it, but I don't know how legit the business deal was or anything like that. But the point being, they've been in business for years now, shipping DMT around that you bought online. And like, even when we started this show, that would have been crazy, to put, that just seemed like an invitation 10, 15 years ago to get your door kicked in by some federal agents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the floodgates have been opened. There's no doubt about that.
Well, and hopefully there's a lot of hope for this type of thing to help with addiction and these other drugs. I mean, if I was early in recovery, I'd be doing it to try and help. I mean,
well, the stories that you hear are just amazing. Some guy came up to me in Denver at that meeting. I think he was a Vietnam vet. Completely hopelessly dependent on alcohol. Smoked some DMT one day and just stopped drinking alcohol. And to make the point, he even moved to a house across the street from the bar in order to, demonstrate to himself how he had changed. This was from smoking DMT one time, so, there is potential for something,
So what is that? What's happening there? I mean, this happens all the time, whether it's alcohol, whether it's quitting something else, whether it's someone, I mean, I've seen people who their face completely changes, but at the minimum, you seem to be dealing with some sort of trauma or something. I mean, trauma is kind of a buzzword now, but something gets dealt with when you're in this DMT state, but you don't seem to actually deal with it. What is that? Because I would bet money that this fella didn't have anything in his experience that was like, where you might have a bunch of mushrooms and you have this like real self-reflection on something, and you can sort of, use that to get out of something. I feel like, if you take a bunch of mushrooms and you're an alcoholic, you would like rudiment on that a lot, or I don't know if that's the right word, but you would be like, ruminate on that a lot, and you would really like, well, you're in the state, you would do a lot of real self-reflection and look inside that you wouldn't be able to do without the mushrooms, arguably. But with DMT, that don't seem to be happening. I just smoke some DMT and then all of a sudden it's like I feel lighter, and some shit some baggage I used to have is seemingly gone. And it's like, what the hell?
Yeah, beats me. Yeah, well, there is something happening in the brain, and you know, uh, um, to the extent that our mind is dependent on the brain, then there's going to be mental changes too. But what the connection is between the chemical effects and the mental effects, that's called the explanatory gap in psychopharmacology. Um, how do you actually bridge the chemical processes with subjective experience? So there is something going on in that zone that we just can't really access with DMT that occurs quicker than it does with a longer acting drug.
Even in because you did some experience where people were in a prolonged state, right?
Well, I helped design a prolonged state study in London, which is going on. There's one in Switzerland as well. And there's about to be one, or one's being planned in La Jolla, San Diego, UC San Diego. Yeah, I've never been involved hands-on with a long-term DMT infusion study.
Was there does are the do you know have any do you have any um information or research on what happened? Is that result multiplied by that prolonged state, or is it just sort of does it matter is it sort of don't matter if you're in for 10 minutes or you're in for an hour type thing?
Yeah, you reach a plateau, and you can stay at that plateau for 60 minutes or for 90 minutes. I think those are the durations of both those groups studies in Switzerland and England. One has been for 60 minutes, one's been for 90 minutes. Yeah, and if you give a bolus, like a big dose, uh, right away, then you'll attain a certain height, and you can maintain that as a plateau. Yeah, so you're in a DMT state for 60 minutes or for 90 minutes.
Wow.
Very, very interesting.
So does it seem like more quote unquote work or inner work or therapeutic stuff happens in a prolonged time, or does it like that the time is the time and it doesn't matter how long it takes, the result is the same?
Well, you're in an altered state, like a DMT altered state for an hour and a half. So you can process things in a more leisurely manner, interact with the beings that people often see on DMT, work on remembering and feeling certain emotions psychologically.
Were they followed around? Was there any research on how those people were feeling 6 months or 18 months or 5 years later?
Yeah, there's just normal volunteers right now. And the group that's been doing it in England is Imperial College. And there has been some stuff written about what it's like to be in that state for that long. One fellow, Alexander Beiner, I think, has written a book about his experiences in that study.
I'll have to check that out because I mean I couldn't imagine being in there for that long. I couldn't, after I mean, you can't really tell how long it was. So that's why I'm curious if at the outside end of it, you feel like it was an hour and a half or 60 minutes, or because when I came out of what probably amounted to 4 or 6 minutes, I mean, it felt like a lifetime.
Yeah, I don't think they give those kinds of doses.
That's sort of a light dose.
Well, it's a big dose. It isn't a dose where you totally lose track of time, though.
Okay, yeah, I didn't even know what the fuck was going on. I lost track of me.
Yeah,
That's why I was like, I don't even know who would have talked to the aliens because Darren wasn't around to talk to the aliens. So it would have just been the alien talking to I don't know what. I had that lost all comprehension of self.
Yeah, you'd have to have your wits about you, I think, in this prolonged state. Or, the dose would be one that allowed you to keep your wits about you.
Or you might go mad.
Yeah, you might go mad. And that's a heavy responsibility.
Yeah. I mean, that's a hell of a mad to be stuck in too. There's no like operating on that. You might be able to like eke through life if you're high on mushrooms all the time. You could kind of sort of get around, but if you're fucked up on DMT, you might as well just hit the floor.
Yeah, you might as well just lay down. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I was thinking about your first experience there with the hash, and because I was thinking back to I remember the first time I smoked a joint. We've probably talked about this too, but I think I was either 15 or 16 at the time, and that felt late in some ways. Like it felt like I had waited a long time, even though I was still pretty young. But I don't think it really did anything to me. It was like I didn't really feel it. We didn't really get it. Man, who knows what kind of weed we were getting back then? This would have been like 85, 86. But I mean, I feel like you had some synesthesia going on or something with that. Do you think that's what you had with that hash experience with the speakers and like actually visualizing the sound coming out?
Yeah, visualizing sound. Yeah, it was remarkable, and it also was ecstatic. I just could not believe how exciting and ecstatic looking at those clouds was.
Right. And was there a point, because I was going to ask you this about, but you kind of mentioned it earlier about the chemical to the metaphysical in a way. Like, so when you realized at that point, you're like, I'm in here for chemistry and this is chemistry happening in my brain. Like something is going on here.
Yeah.
Was there a time when you realized that there's also beyond chemistry? Like there was when you realize like, oh, there's also like profound synchronicities or metaphysical stuff that is phenomenological and not explainable through physics.
Back then, it was it was the change in subjective experience. There was that, and there was the fact that change occurred through chemistry. So I wanted to learn more about how that worked. And I also wanted more experiences to be able to see what did what.
So did you ever realize that there was something more than chemistry?
Oh, more than chemistry. Like what?
Yeah. Like not like I don't know what. I mean, like
well, that's why I put my hand up. I mean that gap. I mean that
yeah,
space
exactly.
where all the magic is happening. What the fuck is going on there? That seems to be, it's like this weird space where we can't get to. We can't explain what's happening. Because the one thing we didn't mention when we were talking about all the different avenues that psychedelics have taken is this sort of huge spiritual avenue as well, where people take them for whatever reason and come out finding God or spirituality or religion, or at the very least leaving atheism.
Mm-hmm. On that note, could we take a 2-minute break or so?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
yeah.
Great. Yeah, I'm thirsty and
yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay, good.
All right. So yeah, kind of the example I was going to say is like the shared experience of flying through the city, like in that was that can't be explained chemically. So I guess that's what I was getting at, is there is like a gap between like what could happen physically or chemically compared to the subjective experience of,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, there is chemistry, but it's not simply chemistry, and that's one of the approaches I actually take in the new book, is explaining phenomena through metaphysics, Jewish medieval metaphysics.
Nice.
Which is the physics of the invisible. That's the way I've kind of come to understand it. It's a system. It's a logical system. There's movement through time and space. There's levels of intelligence. There's there's location of experience and of memories and of the future. So that was one of the things I learned in writing the Prophetic States book, the DMT and the Soul of a Prophecy. It gave me a chance to learn about Jewish medieval metaphysics, which are Neoplatonic Aristotelianism. So that metaphysical system explains shared experiences and telepathy and spiritual states and divination, prophecy, all kinds of yes, telepathy. All those things are incorporated in a fairly sophisticated system that was the predominant model in the Middle Ages.
Is that also the Kabbalah too? That's similar to the Kabbalah?
Well, the medieval metaphysicians or metaphysicists were mostly rabbinic and Talmudic. They didn't really write about Kabbalah, or the ones I've been studying didn't write much about the mystical, Kabbalistic approach. It was more Aristotelian, more kind of physics and chemistry and energy and
It's
movement.
so it's so fascinating that you have to go back. You go back to the medieval mystics or the medieval to find the answers that we still probably can't explain as well as that.
Well, it's a coherent system. And it's quite strong, actually. I went away being impressed, and I think it's useful to at least re-examine it as a metaphysical model of psychedelic states rather than a theological model.
Right.
I think this kind of Christianity, New Age, Hindu sort of combination, which has been applied to the psychedelic state, this kind of unitive model. Everything's the same, more or less, at its foundation. That I don't think captures the whole essence of the phenomena. I think you can understand it in a scientific, logical way, rather than simply saying it's a feeling or it's a conviction. Here you have specific ideas that you can bounce around and test. Yeah, so it would be very cool to revivify or to resurrect that model as a
Yeah, for sure.
non-theological model.
Did that come out of studying the Hebrew alphabet and the Hebrew language at all too, or is
Well, the
that correlated with that?
the Hebrew Bible. And if you really want to understand the Hebrew Bible, you need to be able to read biblical Hebrew, and you need to go through a lot of commentaries, commentators, and these were mostly from the Middle Ages as well. And so they explained what was going on in the Bible using metaphysical concepts. This is what they're describing. This is what happened. So that's one way to read the Bible, and it allows one to develop a system of prophetic experience. There's downflow from divinity onto mankind, and you need to develop one part of your mind, another part of your mind, and bring them together. So I think it has relevance, for the psychedelic state. The contemporary Western one. Like if you read, some of the texts, there are interactions between people and spiritual beings. There's so you can actually model or learn from the prophets good ways of interacting with the beings. Like you first praise, then you thank, and then you make your petition. So
Wow.
there are some techniques that one could apply. Also, I think you could it provides a ready vocabulary for spiritual experiences and for types of beings and how to interact with them.
Have you ever had any experiences with the alphabet at all, like or seeing when you're on psychedelics or on anything like that? Where because we've had we talked to Randall Carlson a few times, and he talks quite a bit about the Hebrew alphabet and how it's each letter is corresponded to a sound and a number, so it's quite the system. And I feel like I almost feel like that's what you're. That's one of the reasons why you can learn about this stuff and it's so explanatory because it's way so much better than the English language to even like categorize and describe this stuff.
Yeah, it's a very interesting language, and especially the biblical form, which was the form in which the text was laid down. Compared to modern Hebrew, for example, I don't really know modern Hebrew, but I can read biblical Hebrew, and I can understand like about a half of what I'm reading now. The rest, relies on good translations.
How much does that like translate into modern Hebrew? Can you like pick up any of it if someone's talking?
Yeah, um, um, I can pick up some roots. Like the Hebrew language is based on three-letter roots, and you can do all kinds of things to those three-letter roots. Um, modify it from a verb to a noun to an adverb or adjective. Um, so um, I recognize some of those roots in conversational Hebrew. But I'm used to reading biblical Hebrew. So if I don't understand a word, I can spend some time on it, as opposed to conversational Hebrew, which you just have to listen to, or as far as I've gotten involved.
Going back to your book a little bit and what you mentioned about looking at it from this lens, you have four different ways that you analyze each of your um, stories, right? As
Mm-hmm.
well.
Yeah, I've been quite lucky over the years to have been able, or to, I guess, have the luxury of exploring a number of, I guess, psychological disciplines or spiritual disciplines. So, and academic ones. I mean, I trained in psychopharmacology, so and performed psychopharmacology research. Uh, so that's one of the approaches is the chemical biological one. The other is the metaphysical one we were just talking about.
Yeah.
Another one is the Freudian kind of psychoanalytic approach. I underwent a 4-year analysis, 2, 3, 4, 5 days a week. So I got familiar with that technique as well. So, and I also studied Zen Buddhism. Practiced it for a long time, and you know, learned something about Buddhist psychology as well, and meditative practice. So, those are the lenses that I applied to those experiences that I narrate in the book. If, for example, it's like the first time on LSD, it's useful, then in the explanatory part of the chapter to, describe, what's LSD? It's a psychedelic. What does it do? What are the terms? What other psychedelics are there? And then in future narratives, it might be more of a psychological emphasis or a spiritual emphasis.
How has you mentioned um, that hash experience? That was your first one. You seemed fairly open to it. Were you fairly open to all psychedelics right from the get go, or how has that sort of perspective on psychedelics evolved over the last 25 or 30 years?
Um, well, it started off with beer as a freshman in college, and I didn't get along very well with alcohol. Um, and then pot I really liked. And then I took LSD at a party once and really liked that. Yeah, so I just went for what I liked. And I hit it pretty hard for a couple of years, lots of LSD. Uh, I've taken 5, 10 year breaks from any psychedelic experiences. Um, so, what was the last part of your question? I'm sorry.
just how it's evolved from, I mean, it sounds like you were pretty open to it all right from the get-go, so it probably hasn't evolved a lot, but I guess because a lot of researchers, I guess, coming into a subject like this would be looking at it maybe a lot more from a taboo standpoint and could sort of come out the other end of that thinking, they're not so bad. But you sounds like you came into the whole thing, pretty open-minded about them.
Well, I was curious. And also, well, all of my friends smoked a lot of pot and they seemed different on it. It put me off at first because it seemed, it just was stoned and I didn't quite see the point. Um, yeah, at the same time, I was interested in the effects. And I referred to that I wasn't really doing all that well in college my first couple of years. So I saw it as a way of dealing with, my angst at the time as well.
So then did your grades improve once you started smoking pot?
Did my grades improve? No, I get my best grades when I'm not smoking pot.
When you're not
Or,
smoking pot?
like, back in the day anyway, I got my best grades not smoking pot.
Yeah, do you still smoke today at all, or do you still have any relationship with any other psychedelics?
I smoke regularly. Other psychedelics, not so much. I took a pretty big dose of mushrooms 2 years ago. Yeah, that's the last big experience I had. I was a member of an ayahuasca church for just a few months. But even in those few months, we drank a lot of ayahuasca. So I got a pretty quick, dip into the deep end on ayahuasca.
Do you ever my wife's always busted my balls to try and get into like edibles or something else instead of smoking. Have you ever tried? Because edibles just aren't the same, and my tolerance is too high. It doesn't work. I don't like these new like concentrates where you're like smoking the whatever it is. I mean, the oil or the distillate, I guess they're calling it. I just like to smoke flower like the old time. But have you found any? Do you like? Do you do it any other way? You just still smoke it like back in the day? Have you found any better way?
I have a vaporizer.
I was looking at the volcano.
Well, it's a improved version of the volcano. The volcano was huge, big turkey bag. This is much more compact.
And the volcano is like crazy expensive now too. I was looking at the one the other day. It was $900 Canadian in the.
Oh, really?
I was like, man, I bought my first one for like $250, like 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But now that pot's legal.
And you use the turkey bag?
I don't now. Now I just use my one hitter all the time. But my wife wants me to find another way. So I was looking back into the vaporizers. I don't think I mind the vaporizer so much, but it has to be flower. It has to be weed. I'm not into any of the other stuff.
Yeah. There's all kinds of routes of administration and preparations and whatnot. Oh, what, are you guys interested in ketamine at all?
Not personally, but I'm interested in other people doing it and telling me about it.
Yeah. So people that have done it and.
Well, I've done it. I've done it one time, and it was like not a fucking good experience. I mean, and in retrospect, it was a terrible time to be doing it. Like me and my buddy Paul were driving from Guelph to I want to say Milton or someplace up by Peterborough, Ontario, up in the woods, and we were like sniffing this ketamine on the way, and we ended up doing too much and had to pull off the road and just like park down some road somewhere in southern Ontario. And I just remember it being the most like, I don't know. I was like partying a lot. I was a kid, I probably had some trauma. I was undealt with trauma at the time, but it was super overwhelming and like very doomish, like an overwhelming sense of sort of doom the entire time. That seemed to take forever. I think people have told it to me as being the K-hole.
I was just gonna say very
But
K-hole.
it was like, so I, after that, I just never been, I've never went back. When people say that, I'm just like, oh my God.
Yeah, well, you feel like you're leaving your body, and if you're driving a car, man, that can be bad.
I was the passenger, but yeah, it was just the whole thing was like, whoa, what a
Well, I
crazy
think that
drug. And I hadn't done really anything like that to that extent at that time. So that sort of overwhelms you too at the same time. It's like that was sort of my first experience with like, that's right there. Because up until then, I hadn't even, we had done some mushrooms and some acid, but never a lot, never enough to, and acid's not the same sort of experience like like the ketamine was, and the ketamine to me seemed more like a DMT experience, on like the just a complete loss of like, whoa, I like, it was kind of scary, or even like a salvia.
Well, I think that bespeaks the importance of the set and the setting. I mean, lots of people love ketamine, and it's a great anti-suicide agent and a good antidepressant for a lot of people. So yeah, but people are coming into a clinic for depression or in a different state of mind, and there's more preparation, hopefully, and there's therapy and there's follow-up. So yeah, it's the same drug, but it's a different setting. And so lots of people get a lot of benefit from ketamine, and people love ketamine too. It's a very pleasurable experience for many.
Like a euphoria sort of thing.
Well, it's euphoric, yeah. There are some good books out there on ketamine. Uh, Carl Jansen has one, Ketamine, Dreams and Realities, I think. It's an older book, but there's good case histories in there. I talk about ketamine in my handbook, but I haven't studied it nearly as carefully as the classic psychedelics.
Is there anything else from your book that we can talk about? Your latest one?
Well, there's all kinds of altered states or altered state experiences. There's alcohol, there's cannabis, there's psychedelics, there's
Any meditation, straight up like meditation?
yeah, there's a chapter on experience that happened from meditation.
How did that compare to the psychedelics?
It was pretty well. It was DMT-like, but I'd never done DMT before, so I couldn't quite categorize it. But it was fully compelling, intense, real, visualized things that weren't there. Interacted with them. Trauma, depression. I went through a depression my first year of medical school, and I had some hypomania before that. So there's mood disordered, altered states. Yeah, so the full gamut.
What about food?
Not food per se. There was a chapter on me having a steak on acid. I was eating a steak on acid, and
how was that?
terrible. Let me show you the picture. Yeah, I stopped eating meat for I think 2 months, for like around 2 years or something.
Wow.
I could see that.
Wow.
Yeah, here's the steak on acid image. Let's see here. Can you see it?
Yeah. Good. Yeah. That's good. That's great artwork. That looks fantastic.
Yeah, isn't that a great image?
Yeah.
Steak on acid. Yeah, I just couldn't believe it. So, I stopped eating meat for a while after that. There's some good stories in here. Actually, they're pretty funny. There's one chapter where I go completely nuts on LSD, like permanent insanity, and I was that way for a couple hours. And I thankfully ran into my old childhood friend who was going to the same college at that time. Yeah, and he talked me down, and it was great that he talked me down because otherwise it would have been a very long night. So, there's that kind of story. Drinking rum and coke.
Does it incorporate any writing well on psychedelics or well under the influence of any of the altered states?
Yeah, there's some journal entry stuff from my mood disordered period.
Interesting. I always have a hard time when I'm on the shrooms. I can't like get anything down. We tried to do a podcast one time, but it was really just train wreck. If we wouldn't have had Graham there sort of trying to reel it in, it would have just came off the rails right away.
Well, I took a lot of notes. Yeah. Well, if you're in a bad mood state, like a depression or a hypomania, you do write, or at least I wrote about what it felt like. Yeah, so I could refer to those journal entries later on.
I think one of my scariest LSD trips was we had these brand new mountain bikes in 1990, probably 89 or 90. And we went riding around downtown Vancouver, and it was insane to be riding around. The traffic with these new mountain bikes is pretty stupid too, I'm sure. But I was trying to follow my crazy friend, like my friend was just like bolting through traffic, and I'm trying to keep up with him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just dumb stuff. I'm surprised I made it this far in life.
Yeah, it is surprising. Once I was on the couch talking to my analyst, and I said, "I'm lucky to be alive," and he said, "You are lucky to be alive." So I thought that was useful.
Yeah.
Confirmation.
Well, we're glad you are alive, Rick, and still writing books. Is there anything from the book that you think we didn't get to that's important before we start to wrap up?
No, I think we covered some of the interesting aspects of it. Yeah, you can pick up the book at any of your local stores, Amazon, etc. And I will ship books from my house.
Nice.
I will inscribe and I will sign them and send them off to you. So you can do that by getting onto my website, rickstrassman.com.
Oh, and where do you have any social media?
I've got a couple of Facebook pages. One's personal and one's public. The public one, people can log on to.
Great. Well, Rick, this has been great. We're happy you're happy down there and back at home base in New Mexico and staying warm. I mean, it's cold as shit up here right now, and it's dark all the time. So, I mean, some New Mexico sunshine will be sounding. We got Oliver and Tori will be listening to this down there in New Mexico, and it's always sunny for them. So, it's got to get hot in the summer, though.
Yeah, it gets hot in New Mexico. It never gets above 100 many days in Albuquerque.
Really? Well, man, we get to 100 here in the summer.
Yeah, and it cools off. It's pretty high up. It's a mile high.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
That'll do it. Well, Rick, thanks again for coming on the show. Keep up the good work and come back anytime.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, guys. See you later. Bye.
And that was a chat with Dr. Rick Strassman. Third time in grammar.
Yeah. Our first was 10 years ago.
10 years ago.
10 years ago. 10 years ago. And then 2020, beginning of 2020, right before COVID, January 2020 was our.
Oh, right before everything changed.
Man. That was when his book came. I think we talked about Joseph Levy Escapes Death was the book we talked about in 2020.
Absolutely. Well, huge thanks to Rick for coming on the show. Big thanks to you guys for listening. Even bigger thanks if you're one of our nobles, one of our supporters. We couldn't do the show without you. We are, of course, 100% listener supported. So head over to grindamerica.ca/support today. Sign up for a monthly or make a one-time donation. Check out Contact at the Cabin for the trips. There's still a couple spots left for a search for Atlantis with Randall Carlson in the Azores next November. And we've also got another trip with Randall Carlson in May in Utah and Idaho. So if you guys want to check that out, contact at thecabin.com and adultbrain.ca for all of our audiobooks. Other than that, we love you guys. Thanks for listening. And we will see you next week.
Season's greetings from the Grimerica Show podcast. Gather around the fireplace. Help yourself to some hot cocoa with a little marshmallows in it. Maybe have a candy cane or two. And maybe some cookies. It's so warm and jolly. Grime Merry Christmas. podcasting from the igloo. Darren plays jingle bells on the didgeridoo. And over there, that's Graham crying tears of joy as he listens in on the little drummer boy. Pa-rum-pa-pum-pum. I see you've acquainted yourself with D-Ron. Yeah, it's true, he pops Christmas trees up medicinal. Wait a second, is that? Yeah, I think that's Sasquatch beneath the mistletoe.
Get over here, Graham. Thank you for saving me and give me a kiss.
And it looks like Napoleon Doom is decorating the room with tinsels, ribbon, popcorn on strings, and poinsettias. They are in bloom. And you might ask, who's that in the green and red Lucha Libre mask? Why, of course, that's RPJ. Feliz Navidad. It's so warm and jolly. Cry Merry Christmas. Podcasting from the igloo. Darren plays jingle bells on the didgeridoo. And over there, that's Graham crying tears of joy as he listens in on the little drummer boy. You'll get a warm and fuzzy feeling if you donate to the Grimerica show. So get in the spirit, reach down in your pocket and make it rain. Let it snow, make it snow, let it snow, let it snow, make it snow. Donate to the show. Donate to the show. Donate to the show. It's so warm and jolly. Cry Merry Christmas. Podcasting from the igloo. Darren plays jingle bells on the didgeridoo. And over there, that's Graham crying tears of joy as he listens in on the little drummer boy.